My name is Nicole. I'm 32 years old and live in a quiet, gray-shingled town about 50 minutes outside of Boston. Every morning, like clockwork, I make myself a cup of espresso, listen to the weather report, and walk to my office, just over a block from home. I co-founded a biotech startup in the healthcare field. Most people don't understand what that really means. When I try to explain it, they nod politely, but I can tell they hear tech and science and mentally check out. To some, office work just means sitting in front of a computer, pushing papers, answering emails. But my work is more than that, it's part of who I am. It's been built on long nights, relentless passion, and a deep sense of purpose. But none of that ever mattered to my family. To them, I've always been the odd one. The quiet younger sister who dressed plainly, wore little makeup, and always seemed buried in work. The one who never quite fit the mold. My older sister, Claire, is the golden child. She's 3 years older, beautiful, composed, always knowing exactly what to say and how to say it. She walks into a room and people light up. At family gatherings, Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays, she was the centerpiece, the conversation, the applause. And me? I was the afterthought. If anyone remembered I was there, it was usually a passing comment, Nicole, right? She's doing something in biotech. They spoke about me like I was a footnote. Like I was something abstract they didn't quite know what to do with. For years, I thought if I just worked hard enough, if I stayed behind the scenes, carried the burdens, paid my dues, they'd notice. That one day, they'd say, Nicole, we're proud of you. That day never came. They never knew I stayed at the office until midnight managing a crisis for a public health initiative worth nearly $2 million. They never asked how it felt to build a company from scratch with 3 close friends, how terrifying and thrilling it was. They never saw the weight I carried, or maybe they just never cared to look. When people ask about my family, I usually smile faintly and say, we haven't spoken in a while. Not because I'm hiding anything, but because there's just nothing left to say. It's been over 2 years now. No calls. No texts. No birthday wishes. Just a long, hollow silence, like a phone line cut clean and no one bothered to fix it. I used to believe family was the place you could always return to. That no matter how distant life became, it was the one place that would welcome you back. That belief shattered on my mother's birthday. It was late March. I had just closed a major funding round with an investment firm from New York. After months of negotiations and setbacks, we finally did it. I was exhausted, proud, and ready to celebrate in the only way that mattered to me, by flying back early and helping my parents prepare for Mom's birthday, like I always did. Nothing extravagant. I just wanted to be there. To help out. To share a little moment with them. Maybe this time, they'd see me. I called home, expecting a casual chat. My dad picked up. Hey, Dad, I said cheerfully. I'm planning to come back early. Let me know if there's anything you need me to bring or do. There was a pause. Then, his voice came through, not angry, just strange. If possible, Nicole, don't come home this year. At first, I thought he was worried I was overworked. I tried to reassure him. It's okay, Dad. I cleared my schedule. I really want to be there. His voice hardened. Claire is bringing her new boyfriend. He's a CFO, well-spoken, very successful. Your job, well, it's complicated. If you come, it might invite comparisons. It's better if you stay away. We don't want things to be awkward. My heart dropped. Cold and heavy. I gripped the phone tighter. Are you saying I make the family look bad? That I shouldn't come because I'm an embarrassment? He didn't take it back. He doubled down. If you insist on coming, then don't call me your father. And then he hung up. Just like that. No hesitation. No second thoughts. The apartment around me went silent. The cup of espresso in my hand had gone cold. I stared at the wall as if the world had cracked open from a single sentence. I didn't cry. I just sat there. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I realized I wasn't a daughter in their eyes anymore. I wasn't part of the family I had worked so hard to hold on to. I sat by the window in my usual armchair, the early spring sun filtering through sheer white curtains. It couldn't touch the cold inside me. His words echoed, "If you insist on coming, then don't call me your father." I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. Not from anger. From loss. I had always believed that even if I wasn't loved like Claire, at least I was still theirs. But I wasn't. Not really. I stood, walked to my desk, and opened my laptop. For over 2 years, I had been sending money home. Covering their electric bill, water, internet, cable. Nearly $6,000 a month. More, when Mom called saying the fridge broke or Dad needed the car repaired. They never asked if I could afford it. They just assumed. It would really help. "Claire's still adjusting to her new job," they'd say. And I helped. Quietly. Like it was my duty. Like it was the price I paid for being second best. I pulled up my bank transactions. The total, $15,720. I stared at that number, not with regret, but with a profound sadness. Even that wasn't enough. Click. Electric, cancelled. Water, cancelled. Internet, cable, everything, gone. No alarms. No warnings. Just silence. Just like how I'd always existed in that family, quiet, forgotten, invisible. That night, I didn't sleep. I wasn't angry. I was grieving. Grieving for the version of myself that believed in unconditional love. I thought about the way they cast me aside, for a boyfriend I'd never even met. How I was no longer a daughter, but a complication. Mom's birthday came. I didn't call. I didn't send a card. I didn't post a photo or leave a comment online. Not out of spite. But because I couldn't pretend anymore. At exactly 5 p.m., I sat on my balcony with a cup of peppermint tea. The sun was setting behind the trees. My phone buzzed. It was my mother. I stared at the screen, then let it go dark. A message followed. "Nicole, why is the power out? Can you check for us?" Another from Dad. No. That was it. No apologies. No understanding. Just confusion that their lifeline, the daughter they'd ignored, had stopped giving. I took a deep breath, leaned back in my chair, and let the wind carry the pain away. I wasn't cruel. I was done. Not because I stopped loving them. But because I finally started loving myself. The morning of my mother's birthday, the Boston sky hung low with fog. A soft gray mist rolled across the empty streets below, quieting the world as if even the city itself knew something was coming undone. I wrapped both hands around a steaming mug of black coffee and sat by the window, watching as the branches of the elm tree swayed gently in the early April breeze. I didn't plan to call. I didn't text. I didn't post a cheerful photo or write a heartfelt message. There was no pretending anymore. I'd spent too many years writing stories for them, ones where I was the dependable daughter, the silent helper, the invisible pillar holding everyone else up. But this chapter didn't belong to them. It belonged to me. My phone buzzed. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Another message from my mother. "Nicole, I know yesterday got tense, but please, the guests are still here. Can you just take care of the internet? We'll talk later. Love you." I set the phone down gently. There was no apology. No acknowledgement of the words my father had thrown at me like stones. No remorse, no warmth, just another request wrapped in habit and expectation. They didn't want me. Not as a daughter. Not even as a person. They wanted a technician. A quiet solution. A background character with a wallet and no voice. The realization didn't hurt the way it once would have. It didn't even sting. It simply settled inside me like a long-ignored truth finally spoken aloud. I stepped outside, letting the brisk air touch my face. I stood quietly, arms folded, listening to the distant hum of life beyond the porch. For the first time in a long time, I felt still. That afternoon, I walked back into my office. The familiar scent of paper and fresh espresso greeted me. Everything was just as I'd left it, neat, warm, mine. The glass wall behind my desk revealed the hazy Boston skyline in shades of slate and pearl. A knock. I looked up. Liam stood in the doorway, folder in hand, his posture stiff but hesitant. "Nicole?" His voice was soft, unsure. I nodded, offering a calm, polite smile. "Welcome to Pacific Genomics." He stepped in, slowly, as if unsure whether he belonged. His eyes searched my face, not for answers, I think, but for confirmation that this wasn't a mistake. That the woman his girlfriend's family had tried to erase was now standing in front of him as his direct superior. I gestured to the chair. "I'll be reviewing the finance transition plan for the Boston office. Your experience in the New Jersey branch was impressive." Liam sat down without a word. His hands gripped the folder a little too tightly. I noticed the flicker of recognition, the questions he didn't ask, the words he swallowed. He glanced up. "They never mentioned." "I know," I said simply. "They never do." There was no anger in my voice. No sarcasm. Just truth. I slid the contract toward him, and he took it with trembling fingers. After a brief pause, he stood, nodded, and quietly left the room. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled. Not joy. Not triumph. Just peace. The truth had spoken for itself. I didn't have to scream it or fight for it. It had a voice of its own now, etched in every cancelled payment, every ignored phone call, every silence that finally found its ending. For years, I had waited to be seen. To be loved. To be enough. But now, I saw myself. And that, I realized, was more than they had ever offered. The next week passed in a gentle rhythm. I spent long evenings walking by the Charles River, watching the water glitter in the fading light. I cooked dinner for myself, not rushing, not eating over my laptop, but sitting down with a glass of wine and breathing in the calm. I filled my apartment with quiet jazz and fresh flowers. I wrote in my journal again. I let the silence fill me, not as emptiness, but as space finally reclaimed. And I didn't reply to any of their messages. Not the follow-up emails from Mom about the water bill. Not the voicemail from Claire accusing me of ruining everything. Not even the brief text from Dad, no apology, just a curt "hope you're well." Let them sit with it. Let them see what it means when the person they thought would always stay finally walks away. One evening, weeks later, as the lilacs bloomed outside my window and the last gold sliver of sun melted below the skyline, I looked at an old photo of our family, one of the few I had kept. Claire, front and center, smiling like a porcelain doll. My parents on either side, proud and composed. And me, standing slightly to the back, barely in frame. I turned the photo over and placed it back in the drawer. That wasn't my family anymore. I didn't need a stage to stand on. I didn't need their approval to matter. I had built something real, with my hands, with my mind, with my resilience. And maybe, just maybe, that was what they could never understand. I wasn't the faint shadow behind someone else's spotlight. I was the light they never thought to look for. And now, I would shine anyway. I just remembered being shut out of a family event, having my role as a daughter weighed against the convenience of a guest list. That wasn't revenge. That was just truth, with the curtain finally pulled back. I stared at my mother's message for a long time. I never expected you to choose this way to get back at the family. She had no idea. I wasn't trying to get back at anyone. I wasn't trying at all. I had simply stopped trying. The silence in my apartment felt gentler now. Not empty, just honest. No performance, no pretending. I finished my tea and walked to the window. Outside, the city pulsed on in its usual rhythm, distant horns, birds cutting across the cloudy sky, the sound of someone walking their dog on the street below. Life was still moving. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was chasing after it, begging for a place inside it. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not out of stress, but because my mind kept wandering, backward, forward, then finally inward. I remembered being 14, sitting alone on the stairs during Claire's sweet 16 while she posed for photos in a tiara, all sparkle and grace. I remembered my mother brushing my hair aside quickly, telling me to go get more napkins from the kitchen. I remembered my father's proud smile that evening, but not once directed at me. I remembered every silent moment that said, "You're not enough." And now I saw them for what they were, not indictments of who I was, but reflections of who they chose to see. Or rather, not see. The next morning, I woke up early and did something I hadn't done in months. I took the long walk to the harbor before sunrise. Boston was still asleep, the water still and silver under the pale light. I watched the boats shift gently in their slips and listened to the sound of wind brushing through sail lines. Something about that moment felt sacred, like shedding skin. By the time I returned home, I had 5 missed calls from Claire, 2 from my dad, and 1 from my mother. No. She hesitated, then placed the bag on the table and pulled out a printed sheet. "We've thought it through," she said. "You're stable now. Your job is established. The company's name is starting to mean something. So, we were hoping you might consider helping us restructure the mortgage. It's been tight, especially with the power company threatening to cut things again." There it was. The silence between us throbbed with a dull ache, like the sting from a wound that had never fully closed. I looked at the sheet without touching it. Neat columns. Numbers. Projections. A tidy, transactional ask, as if healing could be drawn up in Excel. For years, I had been the ghost child. Present in service, invisible in value. Now, suddenly, I had value again, because I could be useful. Not because they missed me. Not because they loved me. But because I could offer rescue. My mother, still speaking carefully, added, "You've always been responsible, Nicole. We know we haven't said it, but we're proud." I heard the word, proud, and felt nothing. Pride, to me, had always come too late, always after the silence, after the dismissal, after the closed doors and missed milestones. And now, here they were, trying to speak a language we had never shared. My father finally leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "We didn't handle things well. Maybe we just didn't know how to handle you. The way you are. So independent. So private." I looked up slowly, my voice calm but clear. "You didn't need to handle me. You just needed to include me." They both looked down, shame slipping in at last. After a long pause, I pushed the paper back across the table. "I've already given a lot," I said. Silently. Without applause. I paid bills without being asked. I kept this family afloat from a distance you created. And not once, did anyone ask if I was okay. My mother's eyes began to glisten, but I didn't soften. "I'm not angry," I added. "I'm tired." There's a difference. And I've learned that exhaustion is its own kind of clarity. My father sat back, and for the first time in a long time, looked like he didn't know what to say. "Nicole," my mom began again, "we just thought maybe this could be a turning point. A fresh start." I shook my head gently. A fresh start doesn't come with a financial request. A fresh start comes with an apology, without expectation. The room felt still, suspended in a silence they couldn't escape this time. I stood up and walked to the window. The late afternoon light spilled across the hardwood floors, soft and golden. The kind of light that makes everything look warmer than it really is. "I'm not shutting the door," I said quietly. "But I'm not leaving it wide open anymore either. If you want to know me now, you'll have to meet me where I am, not where it's convenient. I walked back toward the door and opened it. My heart wasn't cold, but it was no longer desperate. It was steady. They stood, slowly, uncertainly. My mother placed the printed sheet back into the bag. She didn't say anything. My father nodded once, more solemn than dismissive, and followed her out. Before stepping through the door, my mother turned one last time. "You've become someone we don't know," she said, voice barely above a whisper. I met her eyes. "No. I've always been this person. You just didn't want to see me." And with that, I closed the door. It didn't slam. It didn't echo. It simply clicked shut, softly, like the ending of a chapter written long ago. That night, I lit a candle on my desk, not out of ceremony, but to remind myself how far I'd come. The flame flickered gently as I opened my journal and began to write. Not about them, not about the past, but about the quiet strength it takes to stop performing for people who only clap when it benefits them. Somewhere in the city, Claire was probably still unraveling the version of herself that only worked when others weren't watching closely. Somewhere, my parents were sitting in the silence of their own making, maybe reading that paper again, realizing it was never the money they needed, it was the daughter they had never truly seen. But here, in my apartment, surrounded by peace I had built myself, I wrote. You don't need to be loud to be heard. You don't need to be seen to be worthy. And sometimes, silence is the clearest way to speak. I closed the journal, blew out the candle, and went to bed with no guilt, no bitterness, just a quiet, steady truth. I had become someone I was proud of. And this time, it was enough that I knew it. For years, I was the daughter in the background. The dependable one. The invisible one. The one who made the payments no one asked about and received no thanks for. I paid quietly, loved quietly, disappeared quietly. But not anymore. When my parents showed up unannounced, asking for $2,000 a month to help with their living expenses, it wasn't the number that shook me, it was the expectation. The belief that I owed them simply because I had made it. They brought a proposal, a printed sheet, clinical and clean. A plan that detailed how, now that I was stable, I could start helping, just a little, $2,000 monthly. Retirement. Insurance. Expenses. It's not much, my dad added. Not for someone in your position. I asked, what about Claire? My mother looked away. She's not doing well after the breakup. Work's been hard. We can't pressure her. I laughed, softly, without bitterness. Just because it felt too familiar. Claire was never to be pressured. I was always the one who could handle it. If Claire contributes her part, $1,000, I'll consider. But only with a contract. One that states, when you both pass, all assets, including the house, come to me. A beat of silence. Then my father's face turned red. You're seriously giving your own parents conditions, he said, almost spitting the word. Not conditions, I answered. Principles. I've spent nearly $16,000 on this family in the past 2 years, without a single thank you. If you want help, then things need to be clear. Honest. And mutual. My mother reached toward him. Maybe we should think it over. But he slammed his hand on the table. We raised you for 20 years. We gave you everything, and now this? I stayed seated. Calm. Unmoved. Dad, I don't owe you. If you think raising me was an investment you're expecting returns on, we can calculate it line by line. But I won't pay with my silence anymore. He stared at me, chest rising and falling, but didn't say another word. My mother touched his arm. Let's go. I walked them to the door in silence. No hugs. No goodbyes. When the door clicked shut, it felt like the final page of a chapter only I had the courage to close. And that chapter, of quietly begging for acceptance, of sacrificing myself for their peace, was over. They never reached out again. No apologies. No explanations. Just the same silence they always used when they no longer held the reins. But this time I wasn't hurt by it. I was free from it. I kept living. Breathing. Building. Mornings with warm coffee. Evenings filled with strategic meetings, high-stakes decisions, and moments of pride. I led a team of 200+ people. I signed off on million-dollar partnerships. I wore blazers not to impress, but because I had earned every thread. And most importantly, I stopped trying to make myself smaller to fit inside someone else's definition of family. Because if family only exists when you're useful, then it's not family, it's a transaction. And I was done paying the cost. I took down the old family photo from my wall. I didn't send birthday cards. I didn't hover over the typing bubbles in group chats. I simply moved forward. Liam, now head of finance at Pacific Genomics, never once brought up Claire again. We worked with quiet respect. Some things, once fully seen, don't need to be spoken of. One afternoon, I stopped by my favorite cafe after work. Rain tapped gently on the window beside me as I sipped a warm latte. On the wooden wall hung a simple carving. Home is not always a place. Sometimes it's a choice. I stared at it for a long time. That was the lesson I had learned far too late, but just in time to save myself. If you're reading this and thinking, Nicole, that's cold. You turned your back on your family. Let me say this, I turned away from the weight of pretending. I turned away from the role of financial fallback, the silent supporter, the daughter deemed not good enough because my job title was too difficult to pronounce at a dinner table. I didn't stop being a daughter. They stopped seeing me as one long before. So no, I don't regret saying no. I only regret how long it took me to realize I deserved more than breadcrumbs of affection served between demands. To anyone who's been where I've been, dismissed, used, silenced, your voice matters. Your boundaries matter. Your peace matters. Love should not hurt. Love should not demand sacrifice without recognition. And love should never be leveraged like currency. This is my story. Not one of revenge, but of reclamation. I didn't raise my voice. I raised my standards. And in doing so, I finally found the version of home that didn't need approval to exist. My name is Nicole. And I chose me.